Are we ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'll go ahead and start roll call again here.
Okay.
Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Present.
Ms. Brown? Present. Donald Horrall? Amy Lopes? Here. Roger Hofstall?
Here.
Chris Savage? Suzanne Bauer? Derek Williams?
Here.
Casey Austin Tibbetts? Here. John Sanders?
Here.
Kelly Deming? Braden Sanchez?
Present.
Brittany Dyer?
Present.
Julie Connell? Ned Leba?
I'm here.
Jamie Agers? Here. Mary Fast? Scott Robertson? Orchel Cryer?
Here.
Kalish Morrow? Patricia Matthews? Jose Delgadillo?
Here.
Ben Cantu? Angela Nguyen? Richard O'Brien?
Here.
Dennis Medeiros?
Here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. Before we go continue on, I want to make sure, again, good morning, everybody. Welcome. And looks like we might be getting some rain between this afternoon and maybe tomorrow. So maybe it'll slow the meltdown. And today I would like to take some time to make sure that we hear from all of the board members in regards to the activity of the melting and of the damage being occurred in the various counties, so that everybody can have an idea of what's happening out there. But again, at this time, I want to make sure that everybody turns off their cell phones or electronic devices so that it doesn't interfere with the electronic equipment that we have both here in the Central, the Bakersfield, and in the Modesto office. Please, at the time of the public comment will occur at the end of each item. We will go to the board first and then go to the public in all three locations. And the items on the agenda, we will allow the public to comment at the end of each discussion. And during the public comment, those items can be discussed or not and cannot be on the agenda items that we're going to be discussing. So again, thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll continue on with item number 3, which is the approval of the board minutes from April 4th. And at this time, I will entertain if there's any corrections, addendum changes, or whatever. And I will go through the various locations. First, in the Central, any changes or corrections to the minutes of April 4th? Hearing none, I'll move to the South. Any corrections or addendum changes to the minutes from April 4th?
No changes from the South.
Okay, let's bring it back here to the Central. Any changes from the board members? Okay, let's open it to the public. Is there any changes from the public in the North on the minutes dated April 4th? Hearing none, we'll go to the South. Public comment on the minutes of April 4th.
No comments from the South, and it looks like the North is having some volume trouble, or they can't be heard.
excuse me, through the chair, members did not have a chance to comment on that.
Oh, I apologize. Then let me go, before I come back to the central, let me go back to the north. The chair opens up the comments from the board members in the north. Any comments on the April 4th minutes? Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right. No comments from the north on the minutes. Let's go to the central, the main. Any comments from the board members? All right, let's go back to the public in the central. Any comments from the public? Okay, hearing none.
We have no indication of public comments online.
Pardon?
There are no public comments online.
Great, thank you very much. Then at this time, we will assume and approve the minutes as of presented to us for the April 4th. At this time, item number 4 is the public comments. This is for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda for the May 2nd. So at this time, I'll open it up to the north. Any public comments, either publicly or by phone or Zoom? Hearing
No public
none.
comment in the north.
Okay, great. Yeah, if both the north and south can at least acknowledge, that will help me. That way I don't have to assume that there is no comments, but at least that we know the electronics are working. So thank you. Let's go to the south. Any public comments
from the south.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bring it back here to the central. Any public comments from the or via phone?
There's no indication of any comments online. Is there anybody in the central office that would like to make a public comment?
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to the chair comments. Again, like I stated, today I would like to kind of hear from each of the members of the CAC in regards to the conditions from the melting and or flooding in the various from the north to the south, because I know that there are some severe activities going on, and maybe that the weather cooled down a little bit. That may slow that melt down. That could even be worse for us. But again, we'll take the rain, whatever comes. So, all right, now at this item to go to number 6, the executive director, Samir, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good to see all the members here, and appreciate all the strong attendance that we've been having. Just wanted to bring up a couple of items that I think would be of interest to the CAC, starting with the appointment recently of 2 new board members to our board. I want to make sure that was on everybody's radar. We have a large city representative, council member Rosa Escutia Braton from the city of Modesto, and the small city representative, council member Gilberto Reina from the city of Huasca, who will be joining our board effective immediately, but the next board meeting is going to be the May 18th meeting, and I'll talk a little bit about what's coming up on that agenda as part of my updates here. There's a couple of items that I wanted to raise to your attention. There's some really good updates on the agenda. I'm not going to cover those as far as our April board meeting. There's a couple of items that came out of that April board meeting that you'll be hearing from staff on. But there are a couple of other items that are not on the agenda that I wanted to flag for you. These were previously discussed, but wanted to provide some positive updates on the approval of the new Valley-wide clean air rooms air purifier program. That was something that the CAC has expressed a lot of support for, and we had some good discussions in the past on. That was approved by the board, and so we'll be working to launch that program and make those available here in time ahead of, hopefully, we don't see a lot of wildfire impacts, but we going into a summer after all these rains, and I think there's just still mixed opinions as to what's going to happen. Nobody can ever really call these things, but I think if we can make these programs available and hopefully help more residents in anticipation of some of the smoke impacts that we may see, that's the goal of that program. The board also approved the project plan and the next steps for the implementation of a car share program in the Shafter community that comes out of the Community Air Protection Program, the AB 617 efforts in that community. So that was approved unanimously by the board, and so we'll be moving forward to look for partners to implement that program there in that community. We also talked quite a bit with the board about the ongoing attainment planning efforts. You'll hear from Emily in a bit about where we are with those various plans. There was a very healthy discussion around the various efforts there, with a lot of focus on the contingency requirements. And again, you'll hear a little bit more from the team on where that is. And then lastly, very significant amendments in significant action with respect to updating our permitting rules, 1020, 2201, and 2301. Is the culmination of a lot of work over a quite extended period of time, with a lot of engagement with stakeholders on developing those amendments. So happy to report that our board did approve those and that those are now moving forward. Lastly, as far as what's coming up at the May board meeting, just a couple of flags for the CAC. We will have our budget hearing. This is our legally required public commenting hearing for the proposed budget for the 23-24 fiscal year. That's the first of two big hearings that we have on the budget. We have the public hearing in May, and then we have the adoption hearing in June. So just wanted to make sure that was on your radar. And then secondly, on the contingency packet that I'd mentioned previously, the plan is to take that contingency SIP, as we call it, the actual plan amendment, at the May hearing as well. And so you'll be hearing a little bit more from Emily on where that is. We talked quite a bit to the CAC about the challenges with contingency, a couple of the measures that we're considering, and with the plan now that is posted, by the way. The actual SIP document is posted. There was a series of workshops that we had. So just wanted to make sure that was, again, just something that you were following, and anybody has any questions or concerns around that, please let me know. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll kick it back over to you for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very, very much. And again, Samir, I do want to make a comment. I appreciate at every board meeting you have the STAR Award winners that you have within the three offices. And I think that's really important of what you guys do and the board do to recognize those staff that from the 5-year, 10, 15, 20, and getting scary after that, of the staff that are leaving and the replacement. And so the plans that you folks have. But again, I just do want to recognize that the STAR Awards staff have, that's a great opportunity and recognition of the hard work. And so thank you and all the staff for doing that. And so the executive team that I see over to my left, none of you are going to retire in the next 10 years. So just look at it that way, okay? So Mr. Jordan, you got 10 more years, young man. So that ain't gonna happen fast, okay? But again, thank you, Samir. At this time, I'll open it up to the north. Any of the board members have questions or comments in regards to Samir's comments? Can you hear me in the north? Okay, good. All right, then let's go to the south. Southern office.
No comments from the south?
Okay, let's bring it back here to this. Yes, please.
Just a quick question regarding the clean air rooms. Have you guys thought about locations or how those will be distributed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that the board's action on the program established a couple of parameters. One of them is that we've distributed the funding by county based on population. So that there is a sub-regional sort of distribution of funds. The focus is on lower income and disadvantaged communities. So there's that layer as well to the program. And we use, whether it's Cal-virus screen, there's the federal models as well that we could use just to make sure that we capture, any communities really interested that, that have those sort of challenges to them. And then I think lastly, we're interested in continuing to partner with as many local organizations as we can in helping to get the word out. So while we'll do some media on the program, there are organizations in every county who were instrumental last year in launching the pilot that was successful. We've grown that list and are always happy to help get the word. So for example, if you wanted to distribute it through any of your mechanisms or channels, we can create. And in fact, I think we have one-pager type things that last year we had through social media, for example, that could be posted. So let me know if anybody's interested in helping to get the word out about the program. Some of the cities, for example, were really helpful last year in getting the word out through their distribution mechanisms. So yeah, happy to share that information with whoever's interested in that.
I think this is likely on your radar, but a lot of times in like District 5, Madera County. There we go. The Enviro screen doesn't always accurately represent some of the issues. For instance, a lot of times Northfork's not on there. However, they might be impacted more often than not from those smoke impacts. So
that's a great concern or question and concern. I think just a little bit more on that. We've seen that Cal screen can have some challenges at times, just kind of based on the way it's developed and the census tract level information. So we did open and we're clear in our item that we're willing to look also at EJ screen or some other tools that have come out recently. That particular question, I'll jot it down to see if our team can see if North Fork, for example, does register more clearly and some of the other tools. But we're always happy to add, based on other data sets, other communities, and make sure that we can get the program to where it needs to get to, and not let the model be the be the enemy of being able to do that. So appreciate that concern, something that we're definitely aware of.
Thank you.
Any other CAC member comments? Okay, let's go to the public in the north. Any comments?
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's move to the south. Any public comment?
No public comments from the south.
Great, thank you. Samir, just one question I have, and that is on the contingency of the plan. EPA did release what those measures were, correct?
Yeah, so that great question, Mr. Chair. So what you're referring to, I believe, is EPA did propose a draft contingency guidance document about a month ago, around I think mid-March or so. It was out for maybe late March, actually, now that I think about it. So it was out for a 30-day commenting period, and now they'll proceed with the process for basically finalizing that guidance document. It is something that nationally us and others were anticipating and we're waiting on to see because of the ever evolving requirements under federal law for contingency. So this guidance document did establish some new flexibilities, some new approaches to helping to look at how to satisfy the requirements, which we did then utilize and integrated into the document that was posted. So that was a critical component and still is in our ability as a region, and other regions as well, to satisfy those requirements. So I wanted to make sure, appreciate you bringing that up. It's very important development that we saw about a month ago or so from EPA.
Great, thank you. At this time, thank you again, Samir. Let's go to item number 7, up to date on the attainment plan and rules. Emily, welcome.
So my name is Emily Nealand, and I'm here today to provide you with an update on our plan and rule development efforts. I know you've been hearing a lot of really long, lengthy presentations from me on contingency, but I'm going to keep it a little bit briefer today. So for our planning projects, first, I'd like to note that we're working on developing a revised attainment plan for the 2012 PN 2.5 standard. We did hold our first workshop in March to present, discuss, and receive feedback on the development of the different components of that plan. And we are also planning to have an additional workshop, which is now scheduled for May 11th at 3 p.m. to continue that public process and receive feedback from the public. We're also continuing to work, as Samir had mentioned, on our contingency package. We had published it for 30-day review. We held a number of workshops to get public feedback on that. The comment period is still open, and then we will be taking it to our board for consideration on May 18th, and that includes our contingency evaluation as well as proposed amendments to Rule 4901, which is our rule for wood-burning fireplaces and wood-burning heaters. And then lastly, for our plan-related updates, we've also held a public workshop in April to discuss, present, and receive feedback on the development of our 1-hour ozone maintenance plan, which will demonstrate continued attainment of that standard for an additional 10 years. And we plan to take that maintenance plan package to the governing board for consideration in the coming months. For our rule updates, we're continuing to work on our rules for leak detection and repair for the oil and gas industry. And we held our most recent workshop on April 17th, and we did post our draft rules ahead of that workshop. And the comment period did close yesterday, but we're continuing that public process and plan to take amendments here in the coming months as well. And then lastly, for our rule projects, The governing board at our recent governing board meeting adopted amendments to rules 1020, definitions, 2201, new and modified stationary source review, and 2301, emission reduction credit banking. And with that, that concludes my updates, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Great, thank you very much, Emily. Going to the north, any comments from the CAC?
No comments in the north.
Great, thank you. Moving to the south, southern.
No comments from the south.
Great, let's bring it back here to the central. Any comments? Okay, let's open to the public. Let's go to the north.
No public comment in the north.
Let's go to the south. Any public comment?
No public comment from the south.
Okay, let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment?
There's no public comment in the central office, and there's no indication of any online comments.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emily. Let's go to item number 8, verbal report from the Air Resources Board from Laura Carr. Laura?
Hello, good morning, Mr. Chair and CAC members. This is Laura Carr at CARB. I'm an air pollution specialist in our Air Quality Planning and Science Division. And today I'll be providing the update on the April 27th and 28th CARB board hearing. There were 2 items. The first one was the adoption of the in-use locomotive regulation. So CARB adopted a new rule aimed at reducing emissions from locomotives when they operate within the state. And under the in-use locomotive regulation, operators will now be required to pay into a spending account, and the amount will be determined by the emissions that they create while operating in California. Companies will be able to use the funds to upgrade to cleaner locomotive technologies. The locomotives will also have a 30-minute idling limit, and additionally, switch industrial passenger locomotives built in 2030 or after will be required to operate in zero emissions configurations while in California. And that will be true for freight line haul in 2035. So the new rules offer flexibility to come into compliance, including alternatives to meet milestone deadlines and extensions for reasons that can include issues with available technologies or emergency situations. Funding programs are also available, particularly for companies that are taking early action or those that are looking to go beyond the regulations requirements. So funding support may be available through the Carl Moyer program, the Community Air Protection Incentive Program, Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust, and other programs such as the Advanced Technology Demonstration and Pilot Projects funded through the Low Carbon Transportation Program. Additionally, billions of dollars in federal grants and rebates to reduce air pollution are available for operators. The reduced NOx and diesel particulate matter emissions from the in-use locomotive regulation will bring an estimated $32 billion in health savings by preventing 3,200 premature deaths and 1,500 emergency room visits and hospitalizations. All right, and the second item that the board adopted was the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. So this is a first of its kind rule that requires a phased in transition towards zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles. The new rule helps put California on a path towards accomplishing the governor's goal of fully transitioning the trucks that travel across the state to zero emissions technology by 2045. The new rule is expected to generate $26.6 billion in health savings from reduced asthma attacks, emergency room visits, and respiratory illnesses. Furthermore, fleet owners will save an estimated $48 billion in their total operating costs from the transition through 2050. The Advanced Clean Fleets rule includes an end to combustion truck sales in 2036, a first in the world requirement that factors in public commitments to transition to zero emission technology by truck manufacturers, potential cost savings for fleets, and accelerated benefits for California communities. And the rule also provides fleet owners flexibility and provides regulatory certainty to the heavy duty market. So that's the end of the update that I have. I want to close by saying that since I understand that these are both really important and complex items that CAC members may likely have questions on that I'm not in a position to be able to answer, I do want to offer that I'd be happy to work with the appropriate CARB staff and also the CAC board clerk to arrange for a more detailed presentation, Q&A, whatever the case may be at a subsequent meeting, if that's the will of the group.
We are definitely going to take you up on that offer. Absolutely. I appreciate that offer because I think that would be appropriate to try to have you put on the spot to, no, it's not right. But I think we'd look forward to having with the clerk of our board here to coordinate with you with the right coordinated people. And probably before I go out and ask, what's the wishes of the board of both the North, the South, and the Central? What time would you like to try to do that, in June or July? What's the wishes?
July's a dark month, isn't it?
Oh, is July a dark month?
Yeah, it'd have to be June or August.
Okay. You'll be very fortunate because I won't be here in June. I'll be in DC, but so you'll be saved and you'll meet the 12 o'clock hour time limit. So whoever the chair will be at that time, which will probably be Chris, you definitely will meet that. So you can do that. I definitely will join, but June is a good month. Do you think, Laura, we can get the staff coordinated between now and then from ARB to be present to ask if questions are asked?
Yes, I think that should be doable. I'll work with the appropriate folks here.
Okay, super, super. Comments in the North on that item for the June meeting? Is the board members fine with that?
Mr. Kuna, the chair, I just have a question. This is Ned Leba.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Are you suggesting so that, these are two very significant regulations? Basically, we hold our questions until June, where we'll have ARB staff that we can address the questions to. Is that, it was hard for me to hear you.
No, we certainly will probably ask some questions so that Laura gets the feel so she could go back and let the folks know, but she's just letting us know that she's not able to answer what determinations were made by both of those proposals, but that we can ask and talk about it today so she can get a feel to go back, but that the real questions of details should be forwarded to the June meeting.
Okay, in the spirit of that, maybe I can make a couple of quick suggestions as to topics. One is when you say things like 3,200 premature deaths, of course, we'd like to know over what time period, and things like years, lives lost, I think is, I'd love to see those studies. I think that had to do with if I could hear you, the locomotive regulation. And of course, with the other, which is giant, which is the advanced clean fleet. I mean, that's a major, a very newsworthy development that we get a summary of the opposition that apparently was voiced over the 2 days as well, and the response. So those are good questions, I think, then for our June meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me bring it back here to Fresno. There's a question, and then we'll go back to the South, please. Couple questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one thing I'd like a little clarity on is, even though 2045 seems a long way away, we all know that it comes sooner rather than later. And we also know that the industry that makes these fleet vehicles is decades behind. And the fact that the long haul for many truck drivers you just couldn't meet it. I mean, when you look at the garbage drivers, you look at, I represent some dairy industry. It's just, they won't be able to meet those regulations as far as long haul. And the industry, the manufacturers simply can't supply it. I hope that is taken into consideration. Is there a plan B as far as extending timelines for the length of the driver, as well as the small mom and pop driver, are there going to be grants and incentives for them to help them, or is it just going to eliminate the small business owner?
Okay, great. Mr. Williams? Comment.
Yes, so my question would be, and maybe this could actually be provided at the June presentation, but I'd like to see the actual hard data and how it was evaluated to come up with these numbers of billions of dollars of savings to the actual trucking industry. It's easy to throw the numbers out. We hear them all the time, but we don't see the data behind it, how it was developed, so that we can judge for ourselves if these are really realistic numbers or not. And then and the same thing, kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, I'd like to know where they get the numbers of potential saved lives, or the potential benefit in health dollars saved. How were those numbers actually developed? We start saying 26 million here or whatever. I'd like to know how those numbers were developed. So I'd like to see those verified and justified. Thank you.
Okay, now let me go back. Laura, are you okay with what maybe the discussion is happening, and then you will take those back and then work with your staff and whoever that will be qualified, and the information that we're asking, then we could get it sent out to our clerk of the board here to get those materials to our members of the board, so that on the June meeting, we'll have a positive discussion meeting because we'll have the data that is being asked. Is that okay with you?
Yes, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I've been taking notes on the questions that were asked, and I'll make sure that our staff here are aware that those are some of the questions that the group has at this stage, so that hopefully those will be addressed at the June meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let's go back to the north, CAC members. Any other questions of Laura at this time or comment?
No further comment from the north.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's go to the southern office.
It's John Sanders, Southern Office. I have two questions. Actually, I'll just say one question. There's no vendors available for the oil industry to provide the electric or zero emission equipment. Yet the governor has said, we're going to abandon this many wells, and has given us, since we overcame one obstacle, put another obstacle in our way. So inevitably it's going to happen. But the other part is there's still oil being produced. There's no zero equipment options for doing this work. So is there someone that knows about somebody who's producing this equipment that's going to become available for those who might be able to afford it? That's all.
Okay, John, I appreciate that. And I think Laura took that down so that we'll have a very positive, and I think maybe Samir in the June meeting will probably focus strictly on, I think, this item, probably maybe one or two other items. So we definitely want to make the June board meeting, I think, more around this item of discussion for all of you. And I think other items, yeah, we can do the minutes and all those, but I think focus on these two discussions just because of what questions are going to come about. And John, you're absolutely right. Okay, any other comments in the South from CAC members? Okay, let me bring it here to the, yes, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, this is Les Clark down in the Southern District. In an answer to your fellow board member up there, as far as is there alternatives in the future, all I can give you the advice I can give you is what we're faced with in the oil industry, and that is they don't care. They set a date, and that's you're going to meet that date or else. And we're losing members down here now that are going out of business. So to say that there's a gleam of hope there, the only way that's going to happen is, and I'm surprised that truckers haven't been circling the Capitol up there, because I'm in agreement that's not going to happen with the technology we have today, and to force the issue and not care. It's a typical, the governor's always laying these big eggs, and then he touts off into the future, and we have to hatch the egg. Well, that means unemployment. That means a reduction in services. That means a reduction in taxes. It takes the whole gamut. So I'm pretty pessimistic when it comes to getting any breaks from the governor. What I would suggest is that you get your dairy folks and all of them together up there, and make sure you circle the Capitol. Us oil guys, I think we're probably lower than car lot salesmen now, according to the governor. So us circling would probably be stopped at with the barricade. But you people still have the opportunity to do that, and I'd be more than happy to walk around the Capitol with you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Let me bring it back here to the central. Ms. Brown, go ahead, please.
Ms. Carr, I have a really easy one for you. Can you just repeat? You said $40 billion in savings for fleet operators. Can you complete that sentence for me?
Sure, let me pull it up again. And I just want to add that the numbers that I was quoting are coming from the two press releases that were put out on these two regulations, so I can make sure that the group sees those as well. Fleet owners will save an estimated $48 billion in their total operating costs from the transition through 2050.
Okay. Definitely, when we meet again, it'd be wonderful to have someone from that program explain how they're collecting those numbers and how they're substantiating that and comparing it to the cost of compliance for technology that in many cases doesn't exist yet.
Okay, comment?
I just wanted to chime in regards to process. So this is going to take up likely the bulk of our agenda in June, and then we're dark in July. Are there other timely things that, being at this, we're going to educate ourselves on this because this has occurred, versus things that we may need to also recommend to the governing board for August?
Right.
Just putting that out there.
Samir, comment?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. That's a great question. I think we probably could accommodate, I'm just thinking maybe one item if need be. The contingency document is going to go in May. So that's, so that'll be done hopefully, by that June meeting. I'll have to go back and take a look and see if there's any other major items that we need the CAC to perhaps weigh in on. But I do think that if there was or were, then I think hopefully we can maybe add at least one item to that agenda, amongst these other state kind of related items. So, and then just make sure it happens in June. So nothing comes to mind, at this point. I mean, obviously there's a budget in June. June is actually typically a pretty busy meeting with, trying to get some things done before being dark in July. But I think on the SIP issues, the May is the next big one. I'm not sure if there's any, looking around the room here, I'll work with the chair on that to make sure that if there is something time sensitive, that we also make sure there's time for that discussion as well.
Point well taken, and I will get with Samir and we'll figure out exactly what items do have to be brought, take care of those first right off the bat, get that out of the way. And then from the remaining time, just maybe put on your alert thing that we may go to maybe 12:30 or something, just because but we'll take care of the most important items first and get those done, and protect that, especially if there's sensitive items on funding and stuff from ARB or whatever.
Mr. Chair, if I could also make a suggestion on the state-related items, I really appreciate Laura's presentation on this and the subsequent follow-up on it. I just want to be clear. These rules have been adopted by CARB, and so I think that I'll just make a suggestion if you're supportive of this, but to the extent that now that the rules have been adopted, some of the conversation is utilized to talk about next steps in terms of whether it's the incentive programs or the outreach, or, I mean, obviously it's important that we all, here about the basis of the regulatory work. These are things that are all contained within the staff reports and other documents that all have been presumably published over many months and was part of the actions that were taken by CARB last week. I think there's definitely maybe there's follow-up on this probably over time, because these are very significant regulations as well. We can't cover all of that, but I just want to make sure, I guess, just make the point maybe that the rules were adopted. And so now the question I think becomes, well, how do you, what happens next?
No, and I would agree with that. I think in my comments to what Mr. Clark and others is the rail industry will go to court. They'll file suit. There's no doubt about it. I think Southern Pacific or any of those Northern Pacific, they will deal with that issue because that's interstate commerce, and I think interstate commerce is going to play a major role. I just know that, for example, on incentive programs, they're easily got, but they're also taken away. Just like in our program, the farmer funding, there was nothing in the budget because the governor's budget is in trouble. So he took away all the farmer funding and the smoke funding. So the same thing can happen down the road, even a different governor, of course, but et cetera, is that where do the billions come from? And to read that they have 50 million for trucks, and when a new electric truck costs somewhere around 580 today, where is it in 10 years? As one truck dealer told me, he will believe that an electric truck in 2030 will cost a minimum of $800,000, an electric truck. How do you finance such an item in the state? And how does that truck go across the country if it doesn't have the infrastructure to charge to whatever? There's a lot of things that was passed in that discussion from the rail side of interstate commerce. And I think it'll be interesting to see of what interstate commerce will do with that issue of who controls the rails, just like the ships, when it talks about the economy of this country and the safety of this country. And number two, I think I'd like to know, Laura, if possible, of how many truckers are registered in California. I understand that it's something of 16 million trucks. I understand that the trucks that are impacted today that are tier 3 trucks, which was 2009 and 10 trucks down, are not being licensed this year, was 332,000 trucks. 50 million won't go anywhere. It will have to be something of like maybe $500 million that would have to be funded to deal with trucks. But again, I think as comment was made, the production side, can it handle such a demand in this state alone by 2030, 2036, 2045? I don't believe so. And I believe that the most important part of this whole discussion is the food chain. How do you move food across this country to feed the rest of the world who doesn't have 100% electrification? So I think there's some questions that we have from that standpoint. Is I think Mr. Lieber has brought up, he wants to know about those number of mortality of death of children and that discussion, where it comes from, where the data comes from. I do know that there was quite a robust amount of discussion at the hearing, but unanimously, if I'm not mistaken, Laura, I think everybody voted for it, right? All the board that was there voted for it, correct? For both items? Do you know, or?
Not offhand. I would have to check to make sure about that.
Oh, okay. All right, great. I just think, Samir, this is no small issue, but what I'm very saddened about is incentives are given and yanked away when they want to be yanked away. So we have a program and there's no certainty. There is no certainty about the incentive fundings. And this is no small money. And if ARB is going to be the agency that is going to distribute the funds, they do not have a good reputation of distribution of funds to the public, to the entity. They do not. Their loan program is not one that I would send home for chocolate chip cookies. I'd take the chocolate chip cookies because I know they're pretty darn solid. And they know how to bake them. But ARB's loan program is not. So we do have concerns about that.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So Mayor, you made the comment that these have already been adopted and we should keep that in mind. That raises in my mind the question of what is it that we're supposed to do? I mean, we're an advisory committee to the Air Pollution Control District. We hear from the Air Resources Board, and whether adopted or not, it would seem like us as a committee should have the opportunity, even if it's adopted, to voice our concerns about what has taken place. And that's what I'm hearing right now, whether it's at the next meeting or it's not at the next meeting. And
yeah, no, just to be clear, my suggestion was that we also take an opportunity, since we have CARB as a part of this body and with the rule it's already adopted, that we also take the opportunity in the future to talk about and hopefully raise suggestions to CARB about what to do with implementation as well. That was my suggestion, not to take away from the concerns and the questions. I think all of them valid, and Laura, I think, wants to respond with the right, team to help address those questions. And I think it's probably I don't think it's all in one meeting either. I think it's going to play out over a multi-year, period. But and a lot of these questions have a nexus to implementation, right? Understanding feasibility challenges, infrastructure, whether it's charging or other, vehicle technology. There's obviously, okay, what was the basis, but also what does that mean for the region in terms of, okay, where do we go from here? I just want to make sure it's understood that these rules are actually in place, and so that there's probably an opportunity here with CARB bringing in the right staff to also speak to this from an implementation point of view. That was really my only comment on that.
And I think it was last meeting, if not before, I mentioned it would be helpful to me to have some kind of spreadsheet as it relates to how the various organizations, whether it's the Air Pollution Control District, our region, and CARB, our committee, how everything relates to each other as far as some type of chart in that regard. And I think you were going to get back to us.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely feasible. We'll circle back on that for sure. And I can happy to answer.
I mean, it doesn't even have
basic
to be
questions
presented at a meeting. I mean, it could just be sent out to everybody so we could review it and then have questions afterwards.
Yep, sounds good.
Absolutely, Ms. Brown.
So I really want to hit home that this did pass. It already happened. It had been in the workshop mode for about 2 years. But now the implementation, because I don't want to disrespect CARB staff, but I don't think there's been a lot of communication with industry going forward, and so that's where a lot of the frustrations were voiced during these CARB hearings. But I think that we can be kind of the middle ground facilitators. So as CAC, it's part of our responsibility to help spread information and share information up and down. And so I'm wondering if maybe a better place for this might be a separate workshop for industry to kind of have CARB staff, if we can get them in person. But I mean, Zoom is fine as well. We'll take what we can get, and to do something as far as starting that dialogue about creating a path forward, because there's a lot of uncertainty going forward. And then I also want to remind everyone that this is for large fleets. So anyone that is, has over $50 million or over 50 trucks in a fleet. And so these are the large trucks. So it's not going to impact the small businesses for a while, but they are going to start workshopping in 2028 for the rest of the fleets. So this is, in essence, the pilot program. And this is where all the kinks are going to get worked out. They're going to find a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of advantages that large fleets have where they're located. And I think something very special about this area is that we represent so much of the rural industry. And those are very specific challenges. And I don't necessarily think that all of that was encompassed in the dialogue that happened in that CARB. So I think the more we can open up that dialogue, Laura, if you can facilitate some of that, but we need to create a path forward and open a line of communication, because even though it's not going to apply to all of the small fleets yet, it will.
Mr. Williams.
One brief comment, and I want to thank the chair for bringing up that dollar amount per EV truck. And I just don't know who should be advocating. I don't know if it's us but who should be advocating for the people, for the consumers. I want to know how they're going to be able to afford food when the cost of these trucks have to be passed down into all the products that are going to be in the stores. How are people going to be able to afford to buy anything? And the people who can't afford to buy it, how is the government going to be able to afford to buy it for them? Because there's only so many tax dollars out there. There's only so much that they can redistribute from everybody else's pocketbooks to cover it. There's not going to be enough money to cover it. And I think that food security and sustainability is definitely at risk in this situation. Thanks.
All of the comments are very, very important. I appreciate it all. And yes, Ms. Brown, the small under 50 has been already being talked about and everything. It doesn't matter if it's tomorrow, they're not going to hit us, but they're going to hit us in 2 years. And we have so many trauma things happening in this state. We have the flooding that is going to destroy communities, et cetera, et cetera. We have an economy now that the food prices are up high. So I just think that, Samir, whatever we can do to deal with, it's passed, it's a law, it's a rule. What do we do and how do we make it happen? Because that will in fact our SIPs. That will absolutely will impact our SIPs of what happens. And so, and having a separate workshop, I don't know, it's the comments of the board of not tying up a meeting, but doing, it's a law. So if it's in July or if it's in June, it's up to whatever we need to have. Having that type of staff, and I'm going to put the public here in a few minutes, and then I know that Chris is here, and Chris has been a very strong individual going to a lot of the meetings from the trucking side, and I know I've been on several phone calls and hearings with it, and it's very frustrating. It really is frustrating. And Mr. Lebron, we've asked for data like the questions you've asked, and it's hard to get some of the data and information that we've asked for some of these numbers that they have put out there. And it just, I don't know. I understand the concern that Mr. Clark has, a tremendous amount of all those jobs. And tomorrow, if all of the power goes up, because this summer everything burns up because the grass and everything else, what do we do? If that happened in 10 years from now, that the forest went wild, or we had a massive amount of destruction that occurred with earthquakes and all of this stuff, where do you get the power from? Where do you get that infrastructure? We know that fuel is there. We know you could go out and start that thing up and go. We've cleaned up the vehicles tremendously. So we've done a lot of positive things. And I'm just concerned of what these folks in Sacramento think about, that we can just do all of this stuff and put this on the responsibility of the business, the jobs, and not even concerned about what does it do to the rural community, because this is going to hurt the rural community tremendously. Los Angeles, San Francisco, you know, whatever that is. So whatever you can do, Samir, are you good with having it in June, or would you rather think it'd be a separate thing in July? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, my view on this is it really just, it's the will of the CAC. I mean, it sounds like to me like there's a lot of interest in getting an update from CARB on these two rules. You could divide that up if you wanted to start, say, on the truck, the advanced clean fleets, as opposed to the locomotive reg, just to save some time maybe during the meeting. So I think if the CAC wants to see that on the agenda, we can absolutely work with Laura to have that on the agenda for June. I think today there's already a number of ideas. I would imagine there's more in June related to outreach efforts. I don't see the workshop concept being competing, say, with an update from CARB at the June meeting. I think that that's something that could certainly be, even based on today's discussion, already communicated back to the team, and hopefully there's an openness between because we're in May now, so an openness by CARB to look at that suggestion, and maybe in the context of the broader outreach that I'm assuming they're planning on doing anyway, kind of a thing. So I think that can already be communicated back to Laura, and to me it sounds like there's enough interest on the body here to have an agenda item at least on ACF, the fleet rule, and then we'll obviously work with the chair to add any other time sensitive items to the agenda. So that's my suggestion, just based on what I'm hearing today, is to actually put it on the agenda.
Yes.
I would just encourage us. I mean, I think I heard trickles of this throughout, right? It's like anytime that we spend a moment talking about something, there's something else not being talked about, and maybe things that we could actually positively influence in their creation. And the word implementation of this has come out a couple of times through a few folks. And so I would say that with the information that's already been requested and the questions of interest from the board, even just having Laura be able to get us that via email and some of the hard science and the numbers, that might be enough. Like, let's see what that is. We can always in June then decide, because what I also heard my colleague here say is that having more industry people available to be able to actually unpack what implementation would look like might be a better use of time. So I would just say that in June, with us going dark in July, that if there's ever an item that we could actually impact for the governing board or elsewhere, or from a policy perspective within reason in June, like let's do that and make sure that we're being productive, like being instead of reactionary, preventative, and then always have these kind of parking lot things. Maybe that's just a method that we do. Last agenda item of the thing of just general, education, unpacking these items that are going to keep coming up, especially if they're serving as a precedent. So just making sure that as there's a lot of uncertainty, rapid change, but also emotion in all of these things that affect the people here throughout the Valley, that we are always prioritizing what it is that we actually can do something about first. That would be my recommendation, my thoughts on it.
Okay,
I totally disagree with everything she said. I mean, that's ridiculous. Here's the deal, and I'm a little bit upset with the word future, and we can't do anything about it. It's called amendments and it's called legislation. So to sit here and say that we can't do anything and we're helpless and let's move on when people are being put out of work. I don't know who you represent, but you don't represent the people that I do here in Kern County.
Okay, thank you, Les. I think the discussions, and I appreciate everybody respecting each other and being professional. And thank you, Clark. And also thank you very much for your comments in regards to the important issues. I think I'll get together with Samir and we will work out this thing for June. And then if we have to do more stuff, we'll do it in July. When we go dark, we might be able to have that time as well to use to dig into more details as Laura pulls together her people. Because in June, we're going to know what the floods are going to, as we talk about it today, of what's going to happen, especially in the southern part of this valley, of what is going to happen there and what's going to happen even into the west of us in the Mendota, the Fireball, Tranquility areas. So Samir will work it out and make it happen. Okay, let me go to the public. Any public comments to Ms. Laura on ARB in the north?
No public comment in the north.
Okay, let me bring it here to the southern end. Any comments, the public?
And no public comments from the south.
Okay, great. And then bring it back here to the central. Any public comments?
No public comments in office, and there are no indication of any online.
Okay, great. Laura, thank you very, very much for your time, and welcome being on Zoom like this. We can see you, and that's great. And again, thank you very much for your time. All right, let's go to item number 9, an up-to-date on the funding legislative session. Let's see, Tom, you're going to do that. You got the easy job. It's only money.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Tom Jordan. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor at the San Joaquin Valley Area District. What I want to do is give an update on where we're at with the state budget process and some of the proposals that are floating around, and then also touch base on the policy work of the legislature and kind of where we're at with some of those issues. So just a refresher on the state budget process, the governor comes out with a proposal, initial proposal in January, based upon information he has at the time. The process then goes over to the legislature. They have committee hearings to take input. And then in general, the Senate and Assembly come out with some of their ideas on what they would like to see happen in the budget. The governor then comes out with a revised budget in May. Typically, that's informed by income tax returns that come in, so they have a better idea of revenue. This year is an interesting year because of the state of emergency. They aren't going to have a lot of that information, so it's going to be a little bit of an open situation. And then the principals from the Senate, Assembly, and the governor's office sit down and hash out a budget for approval in June. This year, when the governor released his budget, the estimate was there was about a $25 billion deficit for the general fund that shaped a lot of the discussion around his initial proposal. The general consensus in Sacramento is that's a rosy estimate, that the shortfall is actually probably a lot larger than that. But as I mentioned, they aren't going to have a lot of that information because of the delayed income tax filing that's going on. The district has been advocating throughout this process in the governor's office prior to his release of his budget, in the legislative committees. The CAC has weighed in on some of our priorities. On a good news front, a lot of the funding for the programs that we support comes out of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That fund is actually healthier than was assumed in the governor's budget. They're estimating there'll be at least $200 million more than he assumed when he released his budget in January. The bad news is that I liken the state budget to a game of musical chairs. When the music stops, everyone starts looking for a seat. And what happens when the general fund comes up short is they start taking money from the special funds to backfill holes in the general fund. And that's what we're seeing with GGRF. The governor's proposal actually cut a number of the programs that we support. The farmer program received zero funding. Clean Cars for All received zero funding in the governor's proposal. AB 617, which we do support, received about $250 million in the governor's proposal that came out. Just last week, the Senate came out with their budget plan, and they have some different ideas than the governor, especially for GGRF. The Senate's plan actually funds the farmer program at $150 million and the Clean Cars for All program at $125 million. However, the AB 617 program was cut from $250 to $50 million. Now, as I mentioned, this is the Senate's proposal. The governor will come out with a revised proposal next month, and the negotiations will continue. So we continue to be involved in those discussions and let the district's priorities be known throughout the process. And as I mentioned, the CAC weighing in was very useful in letting know that the environmental groups, the business groups, and the city representatives here at the CAC came together on what their priorities were in the state budget, and that was extremely helpful. One potential outcome this year, because of how big the shortfall is and because of the uncertainty, is there, and we've seen this a few times, there could be a shell budget adopted at a high level in June with details to be worked out later. So so we're prepared for everything from, getting answers in June to this continuing on throughout the year and potentially into next budget year. The other thing with GGRF funding is a lot of the proposals last year when the budget was fairly large were multi-year proposals. So this is going to play out over a couple of years as funds get moved around and priorities get shifted and programs potentially maybe don't get funding in an early year, but get funding in the next year. And so there's a lot of moving parts to this budget this year. On the policy committee front, I would say we're about, if to use a sports analogy, we're about at the end of the first quarter of the game. Bills get introduced in January, February timeframe and finalized. And the first round of policy committees have just met. And now we're at the appropriation committee, which is generally in the legislature where a winnowing of the bills happens. A lot of bills get out of policy committee, but leadership kind of weighs in on bills with a cost, and a number of bills don't come out of that process. The district, there's a few bills that the district was involved in and opposed to. One of them dealt with the structure of our governing board. That bill did not make it out of its policy committee, so it is dead for the time being. The other bill deals with our permitting system, and it did get out of policy committee and is headed to the appropriations committee. That bill does have a large cost, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in that process. There are a lot of other bills that deal with air quality that we're following. Everything from funding issues to defining air districts as independent districts or otherwise. I would say since we're early in the process, a lot of those bills are in a pretty significant state of flux. And so we've been communicating with colleagues around the state and with authors to let them know where our concerns are. But some of those bills really haven't taken shape to the point of really knowing where they're going to end up by the end of the process. So that's a high level discussion. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, or I would be happy to take questions as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Why don't we go to the board in the north? Questions of Tom Jordan's comments on the budget from the members in the north?
No comments in the north.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to the southern comments. Mr. Clark?
And Mr. Jordan, the bill you're talking about, is that the one that died? Is that the Rambla bill?
That's correct. One of the two Rambla bills died in committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board in the south? Okay, let's bring it back here. Ms. Brown, please.
Tom, what was the bill number on the permitting?
It's AB 985.
985? Yes. And that was another Arambula?
Correct.
Anything we should be tracking IRA-wise?
We're tracking a lot of things IRA-wise. We have kind of a multidisciplinary group in the district that are watching federal funding as it comes out. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose right now. There's pretty much every federal agency is releasing IRA opportunities. There was just one from EPA dealing with climate change reduction plans, and there were two metropolitan statistical areas in the valley that are clearly eligible for $1 million to do climate change planning, and that's the Bakersfield MSA and the Fresno MSA. There's a potential that a third, the Stockton MSA, would get in if some others don't take advantage of those grants. And those are $1 million per MSA, non-competitive, no match. So we've coordinated with our local agencies to make, we're fulfilling kind of two roles at the Air District. Where it makes sense, we're going to be the lead applicant. And where maybe it doesn't make sense, we want to make sure that the people that can be the lead applicant are taking advantage of it. So in this case, we worked with our local jurisdictions to make sure they were aware, and in some cases they actually weren't, and make sure that someone was taking advantage. And in the Valley's case, that has happened for those funds. But there's some programs right now for vehicle charging and infrastructure that we're in the middle of, but they're coming out week by week, and we continue to keep track of those.
Okay, great. Mr. Wong.
Yeah, just a quick question. I hadn't heard anything about independence of different air districts, or what does that look like? I mean, is that where they would be independent from ARB, and reporting directly to the legislature?
No.
What are you talking about?
So it's actually an interesting bill. It's sponsored by South Coast Air District, and it's changing quite a bit as it goes along. But there was a situation where there were federal funds available in California to independent special districts, and there was a determination made that air districts didn't fit that definition. So that spawned the idea for this bill to make sure we fit that definition. It's turned out to be a much more complicated issue than that simple activity, and so it's morphing as it goes along. And I think at its base, we didn't have an issue, but as it changes, there could be unintended consequences, and we're trying to make sure that we don't do anything that would harm us in the long term by trying to solve this one specific issue. So,
thank you.
Okay, great. Let's go to the public in the north. Comments or questions?
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south.
No public comments from the south.
Great. Let's bring it back here to the central, the public comments.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment? No, and no indication online of any comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, Tom, thank you very, very much. And Samir, thank you for all the work your staff has done in tracking those funds. All right, let's go to item number 10, the report of the California Resources Board program review of the district's administration of state air pollution reduction incentive programs. Mr. Todd DeYoung has changed his name.
Yes,
to
it happened
Shiraz.
yesterday.
Did you change it at the courthouse, or how did you?
It's in the courthouse. It's official. Good morning, Shiraz Gill on behalf of Todd DeYoung, to talk about this important item here. Just as a quick background, CARB is responsible for oversight of the state's voluntary incentive programs on behalf of the 35 local air districts. As part of this oversight responsibility, CARB conducts audits of the district's incentive programs, and CARB is responsible for conducting periodic reviews of these programs. So the CARB recently conducted a comprehensive review of the state incentive programs administered by the district. They started this in September 2021. This is one of the largest efforts, 15-month process. The audit ended December of 2022 with the final report recently released as in March of 2023. The CARB program reviews was also supplemented by a fiscal compliance audit of the same programs conducted by the Department of Finance Office of State Audits evaluations during the same time frames. Now, this was one of the largest audits of its kind, and it focused on the air districts and center programs.
It's actually the largest audit. Huh? It's the largest audit.
The largest, yeah.
Not one of.
Did I say one of the? Sorry. It's the largest, and I'll talk about why. We're talking about significant number because of the number of fiscal years involved. We're talking about 11 total years, 9 distinctive incentive programs that were evaluated, the number of individual projects that were represented, 13,500 projects that were evaluated, and the funding, $623 million. So that's why it is the largest audit of its kind. As you know, the district has been very successful, over 650 regulations, rules and regulations in place, and we've been able to get significant emission reductions over time. But regulations alone are not enough to bring the district into attainment, especially with the stringent federal national ambient air quality standards that we have that continue to get lowered as EPA continues to look at those standards. Now, incentive-based measures will continue to play a role, now increasingly more critical role in transitioning to newest clean air vehicles and equipment and addressing the valley's air quality challenges. Through a number of years, over the last couple of decades, district has developed and implemented robust and effective voluntary incentive programs and significant funding that's always been made available. And the district views audits like these that CARB just conducted as opportunities to reinforce the areas in which the district is doing really well in. And we have been doing really well in these. And then also make recommendations on enhancements to ensure that the district continues to be effective, efficient, and fiscally responsible in all areas of our programs. Now, the program review covered fiscal years 2010 to 2011 through 2018-19. And it also included the Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program included in fiscal year 2008 and 9. So 11 years total included. CARB establishes specific guidelines and policies when they put these programs for the incentive programs. So as CARB conducted their audit, they looked at them based on how we're complying with those policies and procedures. They also conducted a number of interviews with our program staff, along with those that work in the fiscal. They also talked to management staff, so a lot of interviews conducted. They also looked at they looked at our specific files, and they actually went out to the facilities and conducted physical inspections to make sure that the equipment are still being used based on what the grant was for, the incentive was for. Now, CARB reviews the incentive programs to ensure that the expenditures of the grant funds are in accordance with program guidelines and within legal requirements, which we are. And the projects that were selected, the 13,500 projects were selected for review, represent an overall mixture of funds expended in the fiscal years. So this table basically shows the program review scope, talks about the 9 different, I won't go into this in detail, talks about the 9 different programs that were looked at, the funding amount, and the number of projects. So the results and ultimately the potential program enhancements, the program review further strengthened. We have a great working relationship with CARB as we work through these programs, as we develop incentive programs together with them. This program review further strengthened that partnership with CARB to craft and refine incentive programs that are effective, efficient, and responsive to needs of the Valley and the state of California. The district plays a big role in developing and enhancing a lot of these programs that are identified here. I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but we make sure that any one of these incentive programs that are developed, they're going to make sense in the Valley, and they're going to be utilized, and they're going to be effective and efficient. So the conclusion of the findings was that there were no findings, which is amazing for an audit that is the largest of its kind. To have no findings, it's amazing. So the CARB program review and Department fiscal compliance audit revealed no findings, and CARB program review identified that 9 district incentive programs reviewed are achieving their emission reduction and program objectives in an effective and efficient manner. And the Department of Finance fiscal compliance audit also identified that the incentive programs, revenues, expenditures, and resulting balances were in compliance with applicable grant agreements, guidelines, and statutes. The district was commended for successfully administrating the statewide lower emission school bus program on behalf of CARB and program material design elements, ensuring that all of the applications, anything that we set up on the website were easy to read, easy to access, and just really great overall. There were some highlighted suggestions for potential administrative enhancements, such as how we label our photographs in our inspections reports, or how do we deal with our dealer network in our light duty scrap and replace program. But significant work, we already actually started working with CARB and their staff right away, and a lot of work was accomplished during that review period. And we'll continue to work closely with CARB to evaluate these recommendations and support CARB updates to state guidelines as needed and implement enhancements as appropriate. So that concludes my presentation, and take any comments, questions.
The biggest funding program. Thank you, Shiraz, very much. Let's go to the north. of the members CAC. Any comments or questions of Shiraz in his presentation?
This is Ned. I have a quick comment and question.
Go for it, young man.
Okay, well, no, it sounds like a very good audit result, and I assume that the audit report is posted online. I assume most of those funds, or many of them, are federal pass-through funds, and I believe you have a uniform guidance audit every year, and before that was called A133. We don't really hear too much about that, and I guess those reports are online too, but every year, aren't these programs being looked at as part of the uniform guidance audits that you have? And would we expect anything other than purity from this process?
I'll take that question. Hey, Ned. Yeah, so we do have the single audit requirements for mainly other pass-through funds that we receive that weren't. To kind of answer your first question, a lot of these funds are actually not federal pass-through funds. I'm trying to think of actually whether any of these funds were federal pass-through. These are primarily greenhouse gas reduction funds, Proposition 1B funds, Carl Moyer funds. All of them are generated through a combination of various revenues that are collected through different mechanisms. You're right, there are federal pass-through funds that we do receive through the Diesel Emission Reduction Act or Targeted Airshed grants. Those, because of the amount of the funds that we receive, there are various levels, the highest levels of auditing that occurs, which we do conduct every year. We also have just a regular audit of all of our programs, including the state and federal funds. Clean audits, happy to report, no findings, highest level of, usually with those findings, it's like, we don't have anything to say. That's what the highest level finding you could possibly have is, we have nothing for you kind of a thing, which is basically the report that we give to our board. It's been consistent year after year. I'm trying to remember whether, I think we just took that report to our board in April, I want to say, or March, which we're happy to share with the CAC. But just to answer your question, very, very good audits in those processes as well. And this is a little bit unique. This is every so often, every decade or so, they actually do a deep dive programmatic audit, as well as a State Department of Finance audit, which is well beyond some of the things that, or different approach to what you might see during the regular audit. So, but they're all important.
Ned, we're okay? Great. Any other members of the CAC in the North? Questions of Shiraz or Samir?
No further comments in the North.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the Southern.
No comments from the South.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's bring it back here to the Central.
Just a technical thing. You are correct. Even though you're the largest audit, you're still one of the largest audits. So you are correct.
Oh, you shouldn't have done that. Oh no, we're going to hear about this now. Okay. Any other comments? Lauren, please.
I'll just say thank you for sharing the good news. It's always nice to hear good news, and your staff is meticulous. So we would expect nothing but perfect results.
Okay, great. Again, thank you, Shiraz. I think the district and the entire staff and Todd and all of you and Aaron and et cetera, and even Ryan, I think all of you do a great job in all of the programs that you have available for our community people, including even the filters, the fireplace program, the clean cars program, the tune-up program. I mean, we can keep naming them. And you've done a great job, all of you, on those fundings. And again, those funds can be here today and gone tomorrow. And Samir, I'm glad to see our DMV funds are safe. And those have been a real positive thing for our rural communities, for some of the cities, to get some equipment that they need through that process. So I think you folks have done a tremendous job in managing those incentive fundings. And they have worked. And they've done a great job. And I mean, you can't just, you've done a tremendous job. So thank you very, very much for all of that effort. And thank you, Shiraz. Okay, let's go to item number 11, which is the report on the 22-23 winter residential wood smoke strategy. We're going to have a combination here of, a John Clausen and definitely, and a Jamie Holt have changed. Somehow, Samir, I don't know what's happening here. There's too many change of names here. Now let's see. So why don't you both proceed? Whoever's going to do who's going to do it first? I will leave that up to you two to figure that out. Okay.
That's great. I just want to introduce this item really quick. This is an item of strong interest to the CAC. It's come up recently in conversations here about the ongoing efforts by the Valley Air District in partnership with really the entire Valley on promoting reduced residential wood burning through a regulatory, grants, educational approach. So we're happy to report on this again for this last winter, which was a clean winter, one of the cleanest winters ever. If I could just use a parallel description to the and with that, I'll turn it over to the folks that actually implement the program and can speak to it with authority. And Robert and Heather, appreciate you guys taking the time to be here to present this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Samir, and hello, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Robert Gillis. I'm a program manager in the Air Quality Science and Planning Department. I'm here with Heather Hanks. She's in place of Jamie Holden, and I'm in place of John Classen. So
now it's clear.
I'll start today with just a reminder of some of the public health impacts that come that are most related with the wood burning that we're talking about. The topic of this presentation. So scientific research does link prolonged inhalation of wood smoke to a variety of health effects, including lung disease and decrease in lung function for children. And a lot of the effects may also lead to cancer or heart failure. Residential wood burning emissions are among the largest sources of direct PM2.5 emissions that happen during the winter months in the Valley. And the emissions do also occur during the evening hours when there are inversions that trap the emissions near the surface and close to where we all are. And that increases the concentrations and the exposures to the residents in the neighborhoods. There have been significant air quality improvements due to the district's overall residential wood smoke reduction strategy. Residential wood burning curtailment program has been highly cost effective as a public health measure, which means there are large PM2.5 reductions that come from this measure at a very low implementation cost. So overall, the program improves public health by reducing emissions when and where those reductions are needed. Significant reductions in direct particulate matter and the precursors to particulate matter have contributed to reaching key air quality milestones in the district. Some of those are the attainment of the PM10 standard and the 24-hour PM2.5 standard. That's the older standard of 65 micrograms per cubic meter. And then also significant progress to some newer standards for PM2.5, the 35 microgram 24-hour standard. So just to get into a little bit of an overview of this most recent winter season from 2022 to 2023, the Valley has maintained significant progress in improving air quality due to the district's PM2.5 control strategy, including comprehensive residential wood smoke reduction program. So again, we've set a new record for a high number of good air quality index days across all of the Valley counties. There have been 0 days where we exceeded the 24-hour PM2.5 standard of 65 micrograms, and this is the 4th consecutive winter season where that has occurred. We've set a new record low number of exceedances of the 24-hour PM2.5 standard for the month of January, and then also January and February combined. And also has this recent season set a new record low average PM2.5 concentration for all Valley counties. And the winter season PM2.5 speciation analysis, and that's, the speciation just means the chemical breakdown of the PM2.5 that's being monitored and as a part of the emissions. That analysis does show also that the air quality has greatly improved for key components of PM2.5 as a result of the residential wood smoke reduction strategy, the fireplace and wood stove changeout grant program, and other air quality improvement strategies that are being implemented. And this past winter season was the 4th winter season implementing the new residential wood smoke reduction strategy, which includes the amendments to Rule 4901 that happened in 2019. So starting for the 2019-2020 winter season, those amendments lowered the curtailment thresholds for hotspot counties of Madera, Fresno, and Kern. They also included public education and incentive program enhancements and new requirements for fireplace remodels, enhanced compliance during real property transfers, and enhanced visible emission limits. And this table here is just a summary of previous winter seasons throughout each individual county. So down at the bottom of the table is the most recent winter season. And what we see by looking at these values is that we've continued to have a high number of curtailments in each of the counties as a result of our forecasting and declarations for each of the counties for wood burning across this past winter season. We can also see that delineation from the previous rule amendments and seasons that have occurred afterwards.
Just to give you a little tip, as you process a bunch of numbers on this slide here, just a little something that helps me think about it too is there's 120 potential days in each county each winter, the winter season that stretches from November to the end of February. Yeah. That's 4 months. It's 120 total potential days. So as you think about these numbers in each of these counties, that's that many no burn days basically out of that potential number of days, just to give you a little bit of a reference point to help you think through that analysis a bit more. And I don't know, through the chair, if would be happy to take questions throughout or at the end, however you want to do it, but we...
Clarification, Madera, Fresno, Kern, Kings, and Tulare are left out of that? I mean, I'm just curious.
The program is applicable to all 8 counties in the valley, and so the highlighting of Madera County, Fresno County, and Kern County is the hotspot counties as identified in the rule.
So there's no burn levels. They just vary a bit between hotspot versus non-hotspot, but all of them end up with some level of no burn days that are called.
Thanks, Samir. And at that, I'll hand it over to Heather. Unless Chair, there's questions.
I'll just do clarification as well. So the 72 here, like listed, for example, for Madera, with the 72 days were not, we were not able to burn of 120. That's that comparison that you were just giving. Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
I do have one more. Thanks,
Heather. I have a comment.
Yes.
There was no mention of that the weather has not been beneficial to eliminating the pollution, because normally in our county we have the Grapevine area or Arvin Lamont area where it's like in the bowl, that whenever it rains you can see the mountains clear as a bell, but when there's no rain for a long period of time, the pollution congregate right there. It makes it kind of where you don't quite see the mountains as clear. But I think that the rainfall had a lot to do this year, considering the many days that we've had rain. And in the past, we had a little drought that it did inhibit the pollution to be a lot worse in our area, and I'm sure the rest of the valley. But I hadn't heard no mention of that the rain had helped or anything in your report.
Yeah, so Robert's continuing to he will speak to that a little bit, Mr. Cryer, but just a great point that you raised. Just back up to this chart real quick here, and you'll see, for example, in Madera or Fresno, even that, there were days or years in the past, where there were more no burn days called, largely due to, you're right, this last winter season, there were extended periods where there were, cleanups through different weather fronts that came through, and so you see generally a reduction in the number of no burn days that were called, in yellow there in last winter, maybe compared to some of the years before. That's directly attributable to the weather that we did see. But there is more to report on that front just in the coming slides here. So maybe it'll help answer some of your questions as well.
Okay, go ahead, please. you may want to speak into the mic, both of you, probably, because it is a little bit, so you may want to get a little closer or bring the mic or pull it out of its harness or something.
I'll get a little bit, excuse me for that. I'm happy to speak into the mic more clearly. She has an advantage now.
Sorry.
Please, please continue.
So here we're going to continue with this chart. Just shows a summary of the air quality index, the count of the number of days that were in each air quality index category, with the green indicating good air quality index, and the earliest years are on the left. So as you progress towards the right, we see the most recent season had a very high. This is the point that was made earlier, the record high number of good air quality index days. And it's also notable that there were no red at the top of that last bar there. So the unhealthy and above air quality index days have really been greatly reduced. So there's a great question about the weather, and this is one of two slides where we have a little bit on the weather. And the atmospheric dispersion conditions is just a measurement of how much the air is moving. And we can see in this previous specific 2022 to 2023 winter season in November, we had very stable conditions, meaning that the air was not able to move pollutants out of the area. So as we progress, we can see December, that blue bar is much smaller. And then January, it's actually a negative value. And then February is a little bit higher. But we can see compared to the hatched bars, those are the average winter season stability over previous years. So really, we got a pretty good dispersion conditions over this past season. And this is a longer trend view on the stability. So again, the blue bar is the measurement of the stability, so how stable the season was as a whole. And the green line is the average. What happens when things are more stable, Robert? What does it mean for something to be stable? And so what we see in the conditions, thanks, Samir, when more stable conditions are here and present, the pollutants are not able to disperse out of the valley, so the concentrations do get higher, typically. And so in the most recent season on the right for the 2022-2023 season, we do see that the PM2.5 average concentration was pretty low, especially compared to the stability parameter that is shown there. And there have been previous years with a similar average stability over the whole season where the PM2.5 concentrations on average were much higher. So this is one way that we can also see the effectiveness and improvements in the PM2.5 concentrations over time. And I had mentioned earlier that reviewing some of the PM2.5 speciation, so this is the chemical breakdown of some of the samples that have been taken at air monitoring sites in the valley, we do see an overall trend in the reduction in key PM2.5 species, which those specifics are ammonium nitrate and organic carbon. So in the chart on the right, the organic carbon is represented by the yellow category, and ammonium nitrate is represented by the blue category. So over a long period of time, we do see reductions in those key categories. And then also other valley cities are representing similar improvements over this same time frame.
Now he gets to hand it to me. Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Hanks again. I am from the Outreach and Communications Department. I'm here on behalf of Jamie Holt. I probably won't have issue with volume, but you might raise your hand and tell me to slow down. I'll work on that too. I'm going to start with just a nod to the many, many hours we spend on the wood stove changeout program, and then I'll dive into sort of the broad-based outreach that we do for this program. Another great season. As you can imagine, changing out old fireplaces is a critical part of our strategy. Getting rid of the opportunity for somebody to contribute pollution is our goal. This last season, we issued 1,700 vouchers. And issuing a voucher is the start of the process. Many of our grant programs, people can come to us later and just ask for some money back. This one in particular, we want you to talk to us first. We want to see what you have in your house and talk to you about eligibility and get you in touch with a retailer for our program and issue you a voucher. Basically, you have the funds headed into that shopping period to purchase. And so that's why it does say that $6.3 million is awarded, because sometimes the voucher isn't redeemed, but for the most part they are. And 94% of our funding is now for natural gas. We're spending a lot more time talking about heat pumps, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And of course, 75% of the approved vouchers do go to residents in the hotspot counties. And the hotspot counties, of course, Robert mentioned, Fresno, Kern, and Madera counties that just have a little bit tighter, more issues with PM and tighter rules, if you will. And then, of course, since we began the Change Out program, formerly known as Burn Cleaner, officially using the Change Out as much as possible, we've issued 28,000 vouchers. That's a lot of homes and a lot of space in the Valley that we are changing over habits, and we're very proud of that. And almost $8 million to date doing that work. All right, let's talk about comprehensive district outreach. We spend a lot of time every winter and all year talking about the harmful impacts of fine particle pollution. But in the winter, we spend a lot of time making sure that the public understands the health impacts, and specifically that we warn them when it's not the best time to be outdoors. So we tie it with the actions that they take to reduce the behavior themselves and also pay attention to the level of air quality so that you're not exposing yourself and others. And then, of course, the rest of the conversation is about reducing emissions and changing out the source of pollution in your home if you have one, and helping people understand why that's necessary. And of course, explaining the value of natural gas and heat pumps and the whole electricity conversion to heating your home. The overall effort that we spend is sort of a combined effort between paid, earned, and owned media. That's marketing speak for the money we spend to get folks talking about us, the things people talk about us, and the conversations that exist out there, and the things that we manage to keep those conversations going, like our website and our social media and things like that, because we want to be ever present. Oops, almost turned off my mic to make the screen go forward. That wouldn't have been good. Of course, we do a full-blown campaign, and we look to engage the public in many ways. As you can imagine, we spend a lot of time talking to you about how the information that the public consumes is so broad-based these days that we have to be somewhat strategic to try and get into the folks we're trying to reach. But as such, we do cover all the bases. Traditional billboards. You see billboards in neighborhoods, older neighborhoods that do have fireplaces. Hopefully you're seeing ads on the TV, on social media. Digital advertising, you hear us talking about SEM. That's us being sneaky. No, that's called search engine marketing. And that's us hopefully delivering an ad on how to replace a wood-burning device or go electric or go natural gas while you're online searching about other things related to wood burning or wood impacts or other buzzwords that might deliver that ad to you. Because if you're searching for it, chances are maybe you're engaging that behavior. And then, of course, we have all of our main outlets. Social media, we're all over the place. I invite you to follow us on every platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Nextdoor. And then, of course, we're busy all season long and all year long, managing relationships with the media and with meteorologists and with the folks that are talking to the public and giving them the information on their nightly news or in the morning. We still maintain some of our traditional methods. The 1-800-SMOG info line, one of my colleagues could probably tell me how long we've had that number, but it's been a long time. And 38,000 is a lot, but it's actually a little bit less. It's still trending down just a little bit. There's some of the traditional folks that still call and get that information because they don't have access to the internet, or maybe it's just a habit and they like to do that. But just the same, we're getting the information that way. We're getting the information to them through our website. 332,000 visits directly to this residential wood smoke reduction page is amazing. It also tells us people have that page saved and they go right there. And so they're relying on us for that information. And it also gives us a chance to give them health information when they go there to check. And of course, the app and all of the information we put out allows people to to provide complaints and point us out to things that need to, folks that need to be educated about burning activities. And so we do collect this year 487 public complaints. And then, of course, the collective number and metrics, we do want to support qualitative numbers with the analysis of our campaigns each year. And we've hit almost 50 million impressions. Those are eyeballs. Those are not necessarily somebody who's actively thinking about us, but it went in their brain, and hopefully it connects a little synopsis later when all the messages come together. Just the same, our continual message is supporting that people need to protect public health and avoid burning. We shifted away from check before you burn, as you know, and that was because we no longer want you to check. We want you to choose not to burn, and we want to educate you on why that's the best choice. So this year, as such, we continue to protect public health and please avoid word burning. We're going to focus on that health-related message. That seems to resonate the most. You've got someone that has a family member with COPD or a child with asthma. You get them listening, and then the message spreads collectively. Hopefully you follow us on our social media, or you've seen some of these images. They're static in this presentation, but a lot of the time that top left is a video. Preciado is a video governing board member, and then there's an example of Dr. Pacheco Warner on a billboard. And then, of course, we have bilingual messaging of all the different things. Happy to share that. Moving on. We do actively do enforcement. That is a priority of this program. In addition to the messaging to the public on why not to do it, we also come in with the penalty that says, yes, there is a penalty for this action. Almost 3,800 hours of enforcement time on nights and weekends this past season doing that. They've got low light technology that helps see the smoke in limited light conditions. So, it's in the evening and everybody says, you can't see that smoke. Well, they've got a little bit of equipment that helps with that. And then, of course, we've got smoke school, as Jamie calls it. It's a $100 penalty. And if you attend the school and learn and actually listen to the information we give you, we cut that penalty in half. And hopefully doing so means you never come back. And those that do come back actually do get higher penalties. So, but we continue to work on public awareness and compliance. That's the goal. We don't want folks burning. This year, we're working on another public opinion survey. Very excited about those. We have done them for many years, and it allows us to stack our research. We're going to dig in and continue another one of those this year. We work a lot with the local organizations too. A lot of the partners that we visit and engage with on all of our programs deliver this information to their constituents and their folks too. So we're happy to keep pushing that forward. And of course, we're going to explore new research regarding a source apportionment of the wood burning contribution to PM 2.5 levels in the valley. That was some of the stuff that Robert was talking about. That was the Modesto slide, right? You had, yeah. So if you're like me and some of the science stuff is a little heavier for you, the Modesto slide where he broke down what was in there, it was more of that, more to come of the research of the components of the pollution. And that's all I have for you.
Mr. Chair, just a closing comment. I think as we continue moving forward with the public opinion survey, really get a temperature for where residents are on not only the issue of residential wood burning, but as they think about technology, the heat pump technology is something that is getting more interest, but still not fully. There's a lot of cost issues and just implementation issues and all that. So something we definitely want to keep the CAC closely apprised on as that all unfolds in the coming year. Because I think it's really important that we do continue to have a really good feel for how residents across rural and urban communities with more or less access to different resources, how they feel about some of the new federal funds, for example, that are available, some of the tax credits, under the Inflation Reduction Act for weatherization for heat pumps. These are all elements of what things that we want to include in some of the surveying that we do, and hopefully those surveys help inform policy. And so that's something that we definitely want to keep the CAC closely in touch with. And I don't know, Heather wants to add something. I forgot
one thing. On that note, we are working hard on telling the story, and we've heard it from the governing board, we've heard it from you guys, and we hear it a lot, the story of our grantees, our grant recipients, the folks getting the funding, what it means to them, how it works. And here's an example of telling the story of the heat pump, as Samir pointed out, from one of those commercials. The staff's going to pull it up for us.
I'm Connie Young. I'm a retired registered nurse. I found out about a program through the Air District that would provide several $1,000s if I were to disable my fireplace and switch over to a heat pump. The advantage of a heat pump is that it doesn't burn any fossil fuels to run it, and it's extremely efficient. And this is one real simple thing that we can do to improve our air quality and our quality of life in this valley.
So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and the CAC for any questions or suggestions as we keep trying to make a difference with this program and keep it, active and relevant to our residents. Something that it's only as effective as residents buy into this. Enforcement isn't the key. Actually, it's really just getting the information out there, the grants, and just hopefully just having more and more, I think, positive trajectory that we have seen, by the way, over the years. As we keep moving forward, we're not going to be able to meet our standards without even more in this area. So just wanted to kind of end on that note. And your input has always been valuable in designing this program. So just happy to take any questions or comments.
All right, great. Thank you, all three. I appreciate it. Let me go to the north. Any comments from CAC members?
The chair, I have a quick suggestion.
Yes,
if
sir.
you can
Go
hear
for
me.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
It's like the district says, it's very important to consider harm to self and to others. I've made this suggestion before, but one of them was that the enforcement officers have the handheld PM 2.5 so that when they have to find someone, they can display the level of PM 2.5 that's being exposed, to the person who is responsible for the emissions and their family. Number two, I think instead of a $100 fine, that they mandate violators purchase for the $100 a handheld PM 2.5 meter so they can see and monitor their situation, whether that exposure comes from wood or from any other source. I think it'd be very interesting to see what those actually register. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the board members in the north?
No further comment in the north.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's go to the south.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a comment. I'm kind of a little confused on the gas fireplaces and stuff. We have a governor who wants to get rid of our gas stoves and our gas water heaters and stuff, but yet he wants us to go ahead and convert our wooden fireplaces and wooden stoves, heating stoves, to gas. And I'm in favor of gas, natural gas, and I'm also in favor of the petroleum industry. But that seems like a little oxymoron. Once you get rid of one thing, but yet promote another thing. That's my comment on there. Let's have an answer to that. Why we're going, they're going to electric, why we're going to gas, that their government's trying to get rid of. That's my comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. You're taking those into, and then if you wish to comment at the end of the board, you can do that if you'd like.
No, I don't have any comment on that, but I'm happy to opine further on. I just don't want to speak for the governor's intentions on where the state's heading, but we do fund gas, and there's been a very attractive option for residents that want to continue having some level of heat and as a way of getting away from wood burning. Although we're seeing more electric becoming viable and becoming an option as well as we see pumps become more widely utilized. So our program is agnostic on it's not preferring one or the other. In fact, I think there's more funding even for electric heat pumps than over natural gas. Maybe that helps answer part of the question there, but the cost is also significantly higher for that. So that's, one of the concerns that we have, and I mentioned this earlier, but one of the concerns we have is making sure our residents have an ability to access some of these different funds, whether it's the federal funds or local funds. The cost is very, very high on some of these projects, and some of these tax credits may not be a great option depending on your household and, so your situation. So we're looking at that right now and trying to figure out what's the right outreach approach. And I think the surveying may also help in terms of awareness and whether these programs are really as positioned as they need to be to really help residents with transitioning away from burning. But I know those concerns have been expressed in the past by CAC members in terms of some of the gas stove issues that have come up recently and other related issues. But our board has always been supportive of just transitioning to what makes sense, what's cost effective, what's feasible, and reducing air pollution cost effectively.
Super, thank you. Let me go to the any other discussion in the South?
No further comments from the South.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's bring it back here to the Central, please.
I'm just trying to ground truth. Do we have any idea how many people are actually, how many households are using wood for their primary heat source versus ambiance or anything?
The surveying really helps with that because that changes over time for sure with behavioral change, with just our grant program, the different transitions that are going on. So we do have an inventory of that. That is the basis of the rules that our board adopts. We do estimate, for example, how much emission reduction we get from a certain number of no burn days, how many households by county. There's hundreds of thousands of houses with wood burning fireplaces, and then a subset of those use them in a regular fashion. It gets complicated. Wood stoves are more likely to be usable for heat than open hearth fireplaces, just by virtue of their design, and you don't really get much heat out of an open hearth fireplace. Now, you may end up with residents who strongly feel that they are using their open hearth fireplace for heat, and so some of this becomes a little subjective, and they may use that device frequently, right? So there's also how much is it being used versus how sort of what the intended purpose of the use is. We try to get to update those set of assumptions with more surveys over time. Every so often, we go back and we pull, and that can be used to update what we call our emissions inventory. So basically, what are all of our working assumptions as we move forward? We've seen a downward trend over time, for sure. I want to say it's in the 100,000 or so homes that frequently as a primary source use these devices, but don't quote me on that. I can take a second look at that, and it's been a little while since I looked at that data. But it is something that, again, that we're happy to continue to keep the CAC apprised on, especially as we go out there and take that temperature, if you will, of where the residents are on this issue.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you for that. It just seems like maybe some targeted outreach to them as we narrow that down also would be the biggest bang for the buck. I think we have been doing that, but even if they had actually things that might be better, more incentives if they're using it more. So thank you.
Please.
I was just wondering, is there an average cost of these replacements? Maybe get that information out to people so that they can maybe know how much they may have to contribute to those. It's good to know, like, you can get up to this amount as a rebate or what have you, but to know how it's going to affect them financially, it may help them want to make that change.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any other comments in the Central? Okay, let's go to the public in the North. Any public comment on this item regarding the fireplaces and wood smoke?
No public comment in the North.
Great, let's move to the South. Any public comment?
No public comment in the South.
All right, let's bring it back here to the Central. Any public comment?
Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment? No one in office and no indication online.
All right, great, thank you. All right, thank you both very, very much. Appreciate it, Robert and Heather. Thank you for the presentation. Let's go to item number 12, which is the EJAG 617 discussion, along with Jessica and ARB. I don't know who the representative from ARB is, but
yes, yeah. We have Laura Zaremba-Schmidt, who will be joining us right after I give my update. Okay. And so for the sake of time, I'm happy to keep it brief, but take any questions.
Please.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Olson. I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources. My team helps oversee the district's implementation of AB 617. I've given an update and a little bit of background the past few meetings, but as a quick reminder, we do operate within 4 selected communities that were selected by the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, throughout the district. And in each of those 4 communities, we're now in what we call implementation mode, meaning we have adopted and our board has adopted and CARB has approved the community emissions reduction programs for all 4. And we are just implementing them and continuing to meet with the communities in order to spend the really good amount of incentives funding that we have from the state to help reduce emissions and exposure in these communities. We primarily meet on Zoom. Lately, we've been trying to meet in person. We just met last year twice in Arvin-Lamont in person, last month in Stockton in person. Next week is Shafter, and the following month, next month, I guess now that it's May, is Fresno. So we will finally have a lot of in-person interactions. It just allows us to be a little bit more interactive and get that feedback that we really need. One of our main goals, of course, is to highlight the needs of the residents and work, of course, in conjunction with the other folks on the community steering committee. So that's the business community, the EJ representatives, local agency folks, and we all convene together to kind of tackle all these problems and move the measures forward. With that, there are just a couple of updates I have about membership. We had 2 communities that did a new recruitment for residents, just because after CERP adoption, we tend to shift, like I said, to implementation mode, and we did have a few folks drop off in Fresno and in Arvin-Lamont. So we did a new recruitment. We're onboarding those new folks now, and we'll continue to move forward and get those folks up to speed as quickly as possible so we don't lose any traction that we have as we onboard those new folks. Just last update is that we have made progress on several incentive measures since my last update. We did get approval from our board to deploy a car share program in Shafter. And we also got approval from CARB to launch one of our measures that's in actually every single community, which is our lawnmower exchange program, which has just been super successful and a really great way to get residents really involved in reducing their air pollution footprint. So with that, I'll pass it to Laura, if that's okay, and then I'll just kind of take questions after. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I know this meeting had 3 Lauras. Good afternoon, Chair and Board. As Jessica said, I'm with the California Air Resources Board in the Office of Community Air Protection, and I have 2 updates. We have just the applications for the latest rounds of the community air grants was just closed April 24th. So currently those applications are being reviewed. And then also the program guidance document known as the blueprint is currently being revised. And there's going to be a draft version of that document that will be released to the public at the end of the month. And at that time, we will share a link to that document with the air districts so they can share it with this committee. And then that's all I have. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Laura. Appreciate it. Let's go to the North CAC comments of both Jessica and Laura.
No comments in the North.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the South. Comments of the CAC.
No comments in the South.
Okay, great. Let's go here to the Central. Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. I'm familiar with the lawnmower replacement. Is there any incentives for new purchases?
There are incentives for new purchases, and that is included in our CERPs. That will be at the same level that our traditional program is at. So it kind of varies depending on the purchase. What's different in these 617 communities with the replacement program is we actually are covering the full cost up to $500, and we've been able to find really good electric equipment for under $500 and conduct events in each of these communities and just do a full swap out for community residents. The rest of the valley outside of AB 617, our traditional program is caps it at $250 for replacement rather.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, of the board, let's go to the public in the North.
No public comment in the North.
Let's go to the South. Public comment.
No public comments from the South.
Let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment?
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? None in office, and there's no indication of any comments online.
Okay, great. Again, thank you very much, Jessica. Appreciate it. Thank you, Laura. Let's go to item number 13, communications. I believe Jamie Holt is being replaced by Heather.
Yep, she did not appear in the last 20 minutes. It's still me.
the Heather.
Okay. Hello again, Heather Hanks, Program Manager for the Outreach and Communications team. Happy to be back in this chair and tell you that we have arrived in the world post-COVID. We are very, very, very busy and very happy to be busy. In the last couple of weeks, we've been at dozens of events all over the Valley. We are very busy at schools as well. Schools have come full circle on, creating spaces at the school site. I don't know if it's because of COVID, but some really awesome events with lots of vendors and community agencies and families coming back to the school sites where everybody spends most of their time. I could tell you that our team is growing. We've added some bilingual staff, a graphic designer, just in general, able to support the AB 617 work that Jess talks about and all of the outreach needed across the Valley for all the things we do. So we are out of time today, so that's all I've got for you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Message there,
I think. Yeah.
Well, I can talk more. There's no question about that.
That's okay. Let me go to the north. Any CAC members? Any comments for Heather?
No comments in the north.
Okay. What about in the south?
No comments in the south.
Great. Bring it back here to the central, which is dwindling fast.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the public in the north. Any comments?
No public comment in the north.
Great. Let's go to the south. Public comment.
No public comments from the south.
Great. Let's bring it back here to the central.
No indication of anybody in the central office or online.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Heather, again, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Appreciate it for
Happy to
you
be
and
here.
Jamie and your team. Let's go to number 14, and that is CAC members. Let's go with in the north. Any of the CAC members wish to take a second or two and talk about if there's flooding damage or needs that is going on in your communities? If you wish to make some comments, that would be great. Or any other item that you may have that you'd like to bring.
No comments in the north.
Okay, great. Let's go to the south. Any of those members wish to bring up anything in regards to the flooding or anything or other items?
No comments in the south.
Great. Let's bring it back here to central. Any comments by CAC members? Yes.
I'll just keep it really brief. I just wanted to report out that there's currently 125 customers that have been de-energized due to flooding in the Kings County. I'm not sure if that goes into Tulare County area as well, but they are regulating the water flow. They're trying to keep it where it's at right now, which has been consistent and manageable. They're hoping that that doesn't have to fluctuate, but of course we never know depending on the weather and the runoff. So just playing it by ear.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry to hear about the 125 and stuff. Anybody else? Okay. I do know that the district is going to have its hands full with, and I noticed that Ryan is here, but with the chipping of trees that will die and flooding and all of those items. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion in how we fund that when we have no money in ag burn from the standpoint of the state. So we have requested, and I know that some of us have asked for support to deal with the amount of jobs that will be lost due to the flooding that does occur in many of our orchards and fields. And I think most of you have seen some of the footage of what's happening in Corcoran and around those entire areas, especially the 14-mile bluff or the levee is a very much of a great concern for a lot of people. A lot of our farmers Their lands are being filled with water to take the place of us not building any reservoirs in this state over the last 10 years. Even with the March for Water, we've not built one dam that has been available to use, or reservoirs or storage facilities. So our farmers are now becoming the storage facilities, which is a loss of jobs and everything, which not too many people in Sacramento have a concern about. And those are my comments, though. Again, being that I have no other folks, Chris, are you present up north or not? That's who will run the meeting in June, would be Chris Savage. Okay, so he'll probably run it out of the northern office with your staff there, and I'll join via by phone in Washington at that time. So I appreciate it. Again, I want to thank everybody for their time and efforts. Yes, we went over, and I apologize, but I think one of those items was absolutely necessary to have a full discussion to deal with those two major items, the trains and the clean fleet rule that ARB staff or the board passed last Thursday and Friday, which is going to be a challenge for all of our rural communities, especially. And I do want to make a point. I want to thank Chris McLaughlin very much for all the attending of those hearings and workshops. Thank you for all the work you've done on that with Roger and your folks. So thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to call it adjourned.
Item 15, through the chair.
I will be at the board meeting for the May presentation and the June. And being that we went dark in July, we'll figure something out to make us busy, I'll guarantee you. So any board members, anybody else, any comments? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being very thoughtful and professional and working with each other. Thank you. Everybody be safe and take care.